Hello, and welcome to the IPMA HR presentation of Change Management, Driving Culture Change Through User Adoption. First, we'd like to talk about some housekeeping items before we get started. We will have all participants on mute during the presentation. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions throughout the presentation. We will address the questions at the end. This presentation will be recorded and will be available along with the slides within 2 business days in the webinar library and the learning portal. This is a reminder that those of you IPMA CP, SCP certified, today's webinar provides you with 1 point towards recertification. If you're not currently certified, you can visit our website and learn more under Get Certified. We appreciate your feedback, and a link to the survey will be provided in the chat box at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. Please join IPMA HR in welcoming Cornerstone as sponsor of today's webinar. Today we welcome Rachel Rutherford, Senior Marketing Strategist, Education and State and Local Government at Cornerstone, and Jamie Cruz, Senior Manager, Organizational Development of County of Orange Human Resources Services.
Hi, everyone. As Maria mentioned, my name is Rachel Rutherford, Senior Marketing Strategist for Cornerstone OnDemand. Cornerstone is a global human capital management leader with a core belief that organizations thrive when they help their employees to realize their potential. Putting this belief into practice, Cornerstone offers solutions to help organizations strategically manage and continuously develop their talent through the entire employee lifecycle, featuring comprehensive recruiting, personalized learning, development-driven performance management, and holistic HR planning. Cornerstone's human capital management platform is successfully used by more than 3,560 global clients of all sizes, spanning over 43 million users. Now to present our speaker. Jamie, can you advance the slide? Wonderful. Jamie is a certified HR professional with 15 years of public sector HR experience. She specializes in strategic talent management with an emphasis in organizational and leadership development. Jamie leads the country's first countrywide organizational development function. As an experienced change practitioner, Jamie has led large-scale organizational changes, talent development initiatives, and served as a coach to senior leaders. She has designed a number of award-winning talent management programs and loves partnering with leaders to maximize their potential and that of their team. Jamie holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's degree in educational counseling, and is currently pursuing a doctorate degree in organizational leadership. Join Jamie as she walks through the county's change management strategy that kick-started their shift in culture, empowering a workforce of public servants to be the best that they can to give their best. You'll walk away from this webinar having learned creative yet powerful strategies and tools you can use for your own implementation and change initiatives. Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. Super excited to be here to talk a little bit about our story. The County of Orange implemented Cornerstone, an integrated talent management system, this past year. We call it Eureka because it helps us find what we're looking for, whether that's learning, insights, or anything else in between. So I was asked to share our story, and as part of our webinar, I'll start with our experience, share 3 approaches to change management that really helped us drive user adoption and impact culture, as well as talk about a couple of tools that you have access to that we found really helpful, or even some that we're happy to share along the way. So when you think about the County of Orange, we're in California, and I'm sure you likely think of beautiful beaches at sunset like this one whenever we mention the Golden State. But we're so much more than that here at the County of Orange. So we were founded in 1889. We have just above 18,000 employees. We're organized into 22 different departments governed by a 5-member board We serve over 3.1 million citizens. We have 34 cities, 205 square miles, 40 of which are with beautiful coastline. And here in learning and organizational development, we have an itty-bitty team to support all of our employees. The county is the third most populous county in California, and we're the third largest employer in the county. So one way that helps us focus on helping people be their best so they give their best so that they can deliver on all of the needs that the citizens have is for us to focus on talent development. What do we need to do to attract, retain, develop a talented workforce? And for our group here, we began to focus on how do we leverage technology to support a culture shift. Ultimately, we found Cornerstone and really viewed that as a way to drive performance, retention, and engagement. And in our mind, this was a really critical way forward. So our focus became in leveraging technology to enable an amazing employee experience. And so we saw that as a way to shift our culture, right? So foster a culture of continuous development, drive business alignment, support employee engagement, facilitate, operational efficiency and effectiveness. We had a clear vision. We could paint the future. We were really the people on top of the mountain here, and just thought everything was going to be amazing as we move forward. All we needed to do was influence 18,000 people to believe the same thing that we believed. And so as you can imagine, things were not always so rosy, and at times the endeavor was a little bit of an obstacle course, and so our change management plan really helped with that. So some of the obstacles that we faced, and I'm going to keep it really at a high level here, were funding and changing processes. Really, as we're going throughout that, we were looking at data and technology, as well as even just wondering, are they going to be using it? So one of the key pieces as we endeavored to move forward with Cornerstone was that prior to that, we weren't necessarily replacing LMS. We had an LMS, but it wasn't working as well as we would like. So throughout the county, we had disparate systems, manual processes, some that we're continuing to find along the way, right? We have lack of access to data. This is new technology, needing to find the money to even fund that as part of it. And then just wondering, are they even going to use it, right? So remember, we had this great idea, but it's influencing all of them. So we're taking the county through this change curve, and of course, all the emojis at the bottom are us. We're on our own change curve as part of this. And so that was a couple of things that we needed to figure out for ourselves and manage along the way. And of course, it all worked out, right? So spoiler alert here, we've done 18 implementations to date. And in fact, we just brought on 5 more this week. We had a 60 and 60, which is a critical change management strategy I'm going to talk about a little later on. And we had 92% of our population meet that, which was amazing. And based on user adoption at implementation, we had 77%. Now, of course, that rises to 100% when you factor in compliance training like EEO, but we were really focused on implementation and who's using the system of their own volition. So throughout the county, we saw, 40% system engagement on day one. We have people who are saying, me next, I want to be in on this. I'm in, spot 10 in the line. How do I get a little bit higher? We're seeing really high levels of engagement, people wanting more features and just wanting to dive even deeper into that. And then throughout the county, we've focused on continuing to align learning so that it's not in all of those different places. And this new system is now the system of record. So there's no hidden systems, Excel sheets, paper, et cetera. And so now we've been able to spark this conversation at a county-wide level. And we're really excited about that progress to date. And I'll say that all of that was really driven by our change management strategy and the efforts that the team put in. We did take a robust, very thorough approach to change management. We had a governance structure, evaluation plans, assessments, different support plans, et cetera. And I would love to talk all about them. They contributed in a huge way, but they're not really our focus for today. Instead, for our time together, I'm going to focus on 3 key aspects of our change management approach that really drove our user adoption and supported the launch of our culture change. And so the first one is really about making it theirs. Second, communicating like a marketer. And then third, understanding their change readiness from our clients. So first up, make it theirs. Now, as part of this was something that a couple people were in a room and were like, wouldn't it be great to have a system that allowed us to really support learning and development throughout the county, to empower supervisors and employees so that they could find the learning they were looking for and really continue to own their growth as they move forward, right? And so that shifted from a wouldn't it be great to trying to lobby for some funding and really make that pipe dream a reality, right? So we knew that Cornerstone had everything that we needed, and we wanted to move that forward. We conducted stakeholder interviews to create a feature wish list in which we talked with really anybody and everybody who would listen. We met with everyone in all of our departments. We have 22 different departments as part of that, and really just had these conversations. What are you using now? What are your business needs? What would you like? What's not working, et cetera, really diving in. And as a result of those conversations, we had over 500 business requirements. And all but 2 of those suggestions were marked required. And so when we were able to contract with Cornerstone, we felt really confident in the system and that it was going to meet our needs. And it was really at that point forward, just continuing to help others see that and actually bring that to life for them. So through those interviews, what was really critical is that we learned so much about the business and what was happening. And so this allowed a shift in our conversations from selling, my idea and the folks that were in the room and the wouldn't this be great, to really shifting to shepherding their business solution. And so it wasn't about getting buy-in for our idea, it was about making, really delivering on this strategy that was going to support their business. And this was absolutely critical later on down the road when we hit a speed bump. We lost some funding and we needed to go through the approval process again. And that included individual meetings with all the department heads. And I think that there was a concern from others that, maybe this is too hasty, they're not going to be willing to sign on the line, they won't go for that, et cetera. And what we were met with in those interviews was anything but that. And it really hinged on the conversations that we had, because when we went into those conversations with the department heads, we were able to talk their business. We were able to say, we met with so-and-so, and here's what we learned, and here's how the system can meet that need. And again, that was critical because they didn't see us as HR pushing a system on them or, here's something else that HR needed us to do. But instead, they were looking at that of HR really understands our needs, and they're here with a solution that's going to help us deliver on our strategy. And so that was absolutely critical, not only in the beginning, but it continued. Those interviews continued to be helpful. We never really stopped selling. Needs change, priorities change, and we all know we need to be on top of that, right? And so continuing to have those conversations and talking in their language and making sure that this is their system and about delivering on their strategy has been really critical as part of that change strategy, and something that we have continued to carry out throughout, not just something in the beginning when we're trying to get funding. So one way to do that, and that was really helpful for us, was in managing stakeholders, looking at what does success look like to them, and really who even gets to say what success is. And is there only one version? And of course, we all know that there's not. There's one version that's in the project charter, of course, but everyone has an opinion, and those opinions matter. So we need to understand success from all angles, find all stakeholders, even the hidden ones. And this was really important to us. This was a big learning for us along the way. We continued to uncover stakeholders and groups that had needs that weren't necessarily on the radar in the beginning. And eventually our map grew bigger and bigger than even what you see here on the screen, and honestly continues to grow to this day. I attribute that continued growth as an indicator of engagement, though. People wanting to get on the train. They're like, wait, don't leave the station without me. We have a need, and we think that this will meet that. And so that's been a really great part of this process and a helpful aspect of understanding the stakeholder piece. And part of that is understanding the informal power. So if we were to pause right now, any one of us could probably create a map that quickly outlines all of our stakeholders. And that's a critical point, though. That's where we need to pause, and we did this for ourselves, and ask, and who else? Who else needs to weigh in this? Who else is going to be impacted? Who else might have an opinion as part of that? Otherwise, we miss critical groups. And at the end of the day, this is all about them, right? So our success didn't rely just on signing on the dotted line. Our success lied and continues to be in the minds of every employee. What they thought about the system, how it made them feel, was this an experience that they wanted to be part of? And if we had missed any of the stakeholders or misunderstood them, then we could have easily had a curveball thrown at us along the way. Now, unless you have a time turner to travel through time like Hermione and Harry Potter, we only have a limited number of hours. So we cannot be all things to all people. And from a change management perspective, it's important that once you understand who your stakeholders are and what their needs are, that you start to differentiate how you manage them. And again, this was really critical for us throughout this process and our implementations, because as I mentioned, we have this really little team. Specifically at the time of the contract signing, it was me and another person. And of course, that team has grown over time, but we were lean then, and truly we continue to be lean today. So it's critical that we understood the lay of the land. And this map was helpful for us to really understand, once we had all those stakeholders, how do we chart them out, looking at, what level of influence do they have? Again, not just formal influence, but informal influence. And then how invested or interested are they in what we're doing? Is this something where they're kind of like, oh yeah, they're doing something over there, and then they continue on their business? Or is this something where we're getting calls, we're getting emails, they're asking about it, they're showing that interest? And so based on where you chart them in the 2x2, then that can help you differentiate your level of effort in terms of how you're managing your stakeholders. We, of course, as change management efforts continue to ramp up and we continue to see more and more engagement, people moved in these boxes. And so something that I was able to keep on the radar and continue to look at as we were moving forward. Now, as part of that, we did miss a stakeholder in the beginning. We needed to speak their language, and for us, go back to, we were the people on the top of the mountain. We had this great idea, and we're talking about the future and what it could be here, and how important shifting the culture is, and professional growth and engagement. And that's our priority. That's our lens that we're looking through. So that was everything that we were talking about in the beginning, and it's important. But was it the first priority for all of our stakeholders? And so that was something that was really apparent to us in the beginning, that, we needed to look at what was their first lens. And so one of the pieces was we started with certain groups to talk more about cost containment and cost recovery and reducing liability. It wasn't that changing culture and employee engagement and those items that we were talking about wasn't important to them, but they were losing another lens in the front. And so the moment that we were able to, identify those stakeholders, really understand them, and then, kind of put together a stakeholder engagement plan with them, we quickly found out that we needed to talk their language. Now, as part of that, that was a manifestation of what became a larger plan for our change management. So again, 18,000 employees, and not everyone's looking at the system as we are. Everyone had different needs, and when we're looking at the main point of the system and how we're communicating that, there's a larger umbrella, and that became our key messages. So for any of you on the line who are familiar with or certified through ProSci, I am, and this was one of the pieces that I took as I was putting together like my own brand of, change management approach, looking at that core document that has all of the messaging. Absolutely anything and everything that you know about this change initiative was put on a single document. But then we took our understanding of the stakeholders and then differentiated that. So we ended up having multiple key messaging documents based on stakeholders, where just like the previous example with some groups, we're talking about, one aspect of the system and what's in it for them related to that and those outcomes. And with another group, then we're talking about different outcomes. They're all leading to the same, ultimate end, which is our culture shift through an implementation of leveraging the technology, but we're all seeing it a little bit different. And so the key messaging was a critical part of really getting everyone on board and continuing to have them on board. The other benefit of this, which was really helpful as our team started to grow, we had all hands on deck. You have a plan and you're like, okay, we need to pull someone else in on this. Because we had a single document, because we had that core messaging and then differentiated by population, it created consistency. So it didn't matter who was actually delivering on the message, whether they were writing it or out and about in a meet and greet. They were using the same words, the same language, and we had that alignment as part of that. And then ultimately it made it go fast. So it was a little slow in the beginning as we're actually creating these key messages, but then going slow in the beginning allowed us to go fast as part of that. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about stakeholders, right? So stakeholders, we're typically thinking about, in my case, the county as a whole, the department heads, the employees, of course, but there was one critical group from a stakeholder perspective that was important for us to understand and really manage closely throughout that. And this was our admin group throughout the county. So we do have a central admin that's here on our team within learning and development. She's the global admin, and she's the one floating in on the Bitmoji there. And so she is that primary point person for all of the other admins in the department. And so it was looking at how do we support them in building their confidence, building their knowledge as part of that, so that they can own it. Everything that we're talking about here is creating that ownership where it's not just us leading this charge going forward, but everyone can see themselves in this process. They see this impacts my business. This is something that I can be part of. I can see myself in this, so that they want to join in. And critical for that were the admins, because we're not in the departments. The admins are. They're the ones that are fielding the questions. They're the ones that are really making sure that it continues to process correctly. And so we looked at how do we collaborate with them? How do we create processes for them to be successful? And most importantly, how do we create that confidence? So a lot of our communication was behind the scenes. And it was really about, we would do some ghostwriting, but they were sending out the messages. So again, it was something that was shifting ownership, but in a way that was manageable from them from a workload perspective. So don't forget about your admins as you're going on in the process, and from a stakeholder perspective. or whoever is actually the one that has to be the face in whatever your change management is. And this was critical for us as we moved forward in that process. So in terms of looking at like making it theirs, useful tools and resources, know your stakeholders. We did do persona mapping, use their language and interest in the business cases, so our key messages and differentiating those, that was really helpful for us, talking to everyone and anyone. And whenever you think you are done, know that you're not. So find the next person, challenge yourself. Who are 5 more people that I can talk to? What other groups can I add to that? Making sure that you're learning what success sounds like for them as well. A lot of times success looks the same, but how we talk about it may be different or it resonates different. So through those interviews and continual conversations, that was helpful for us. And all of that is about shifting from, here's a new system HR has for you, isn't this great, to we as HR really understand your business need. Here's something that we think can help you execute on your strategy. So it's building and then sharing that ownership. So from a tool perspective, as I mentioned, customer personas, stakeholder mapping, and then those key messages. We're public sector, so we're totally open to sharing anything. So I'll have my contact information at the end if there's something that's of interest to you. I'm happy to share any tools with you. So the other key piece that was really critical for us from a change management perspective and driving user adoption to support the culture change was really putting on the hat of a marketer. We could not rely on a simple change management plan. I mean, even if you just think back to the stakeholder mapping, you can imagine the complexity of that as a whole. And so we really embrace communicating like a marketer, and this is something that's had great success with our user group, and one of the things I attribute directly to why we've had such great success with the implementation of Eureka. First and foremost, you've got to know your why, know your vision. For us, this was not just about implementing technology. This was about changing culture. So everything needed to reinforce that vision. We bought a system, we thought it was like the consumer internet, and we needed a user experience to be what you would, experience at home. When we're at home and we turn on Netflix, we kind of just figure it out and we want it to work, right? And so we wanted something that people wanted to be part of. So critical to that was creating a user experience that they couldn't turn down. We needed it to be modern and feel like the future, but not so much that it alienated people. It needed to feel familiar, but also new and exciting. It needed to not feel like the county, but also feel like the county. And so we really had our work cut out for us in terms of that. And we spent quite a bit of time just talking about what is this brand going to communicate? What is the image going to communicate as part of that? What do we want people to feel? Because if we were able to tap into the emotion of that and create an experience that they just had to be part of, we knew that we would be successful as part of that. So the intentionality and purpose were really paramount for us. Everything, and I really mean every detail, aligned to the purpose. Those were daily conversations that we were having, questions that would come up when we're talking about a design choice or part of the messaging as part of that. And we made sure that all of that aligned to, our evaluation plan as part of that. What did we need them to know? We had a couple of assumptions. First was that the system was intuitive. That's what we thought about it. And we thought, well, if people like the look, then they'd click. And if we assumed that it was what they were looking for, so we just needed to get them in the door. So if we could get that click, get them in there, then that would be a significant driver of user adoption and engagement. And ultimately, what we wanted is we wanted them to access it and use it. So there's this saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I always say, well, it's our job to make the horse thirsty, right? And so how do we just create a really compelling experience that they want to be part of and that they see as meaningful and matters to them in their success. So a couple of spotlights that I'll highlight here. One is related to branding. The other is our use of gamification and badging, which is what you see in the beginning, the pioneer. And then finally, a 60 and 60 challenge, which I had kind of opened up with. We've had really great success as part of that. So I'll talk through how these three pieces were really critical to our campaign in terms of really driving that user adoption. So what you see here and what you've seen along the way is our core brand. So we called the system Eureka because the system helps you find what you're looking for. So whether that's learning through the learning module or insights and feedback through performance, Eureka has what you're looking for. And so we wanted it to be something that was connected, but not as obvious as part of that. And so Eureka has really taken root as a brand for us, and people are engaging it. One of the most challenging pieces of naming a system like this is, as a county, we're really diverse, right? And each of the departments has their own culture. And so we needed a name and a look and a feel that could be embraced by such a wide diversity of groups and cultures. And so Eureka for us had that. What you're seeing on the screen now is a little bit of a glimpse of what folks are looking at when they go into the system. So you'll see some of our single sign-on imaging, as well as the screens and then our icon. Again, we really just wanted to create this consistency of the look as they're going through that. On here, you'll see some of the other communication as part of that, and I'll talk more about it in a minute. One of the great ideas that someone on the team had was looking at, again, how do we reach everyone with so many stakeholders, right? And so the thought was a pen, and you think, okay, well, a pen isn't all that exciting, is it? Is it that important? And we were talking about it, and it ended up being really important. You know, not everyone's going to be in the system all day, but everyone uses a pen each day. And so for some of our key stakeholders, we identified, like, okay, we can only afford to get, a limited number of pens. Let's hand those out to folks who may not always be in the system, but you're writing out something and then you see Eureka on the pen, and then that triggers like, oh, that's going well, and just continues to reinforce and manage impressions of the success of the initiative as a whole. And so, you think, what's in a pen? And for us, this ended up being like a simple solution that was really helpful as part of that. You'll notice that we have different formats. Again, everything goes back to what did we want to accomplish and what are we trying to get through to individuals. And so there was consistency in that, and we really approached it from all avenues. And so when we look at it from a change management perspective on the communication, it needed to consume everyone, but not in a way that they would become numb to it. And so we really focused on differentiating communication. We know that, people are most likely to accept change messages from their direct leader. And so we incorporated those aspects, as well as, again, going back to the admins, really trying to shift some of that ownership. And so we had a heavy use of videos, kind of leaving like breadcrumbs from a Goldilocks perspective. We had webinars to engage supervisors and employees, messages, all kinds of ways to have outreach. So whether your physical environment had posters or postcards, your email, the web itself, your meetings with your supervisor, every single source of influence that we possibly could pull, we did. And we modified that and differentiated it throughout our period for our go live. One thing that was a really conscious decision was, for the most part, the majority of change management and communication was behind the scenes with some of our stakeholders. The employee-facing piece was really concentrated to, it started 4 weeks before go live and then 4 weeks after go live. We have different supports from coaching and learning as part of that. And that was because we wanted to go in, really kind of shake it up, get people excited, get them in, and then make it a normal use for how they're using the system versus having, you know, Eureka's coming, Eureka's coming, Eureka's coming. Well, at some point you're like, yeah, Eureka's coming, but it's still not here. And so concentrating it in that short period of time was something that was really helpful for us and an intentional decision that we had made as part of that. Now, I had mentioned that we really tried to leverage kind of all aspects of the environment to connect with individuals. And so we did have different posters we had throughout that they were released on a schedule. And you may think like, oh yeah, of course we'll have a poster. You know, some of the thought that goes into that, and there's more posters than I have on the screen here, but looking at, okay, well, they've seen this color scheme for 3 weeks now. Let's change the color scheme. Otherwise, they're just going to keep going by it. It's the on your drive to work, how many times do you notice the billboard? You know, maybe the first, the second time, but the next time is when they change it, and whatever was there is gone, right? So we kind of use that approach. On the day of the launch, we had postcards on everyone's desk, again, just kind of looking at how do people interact with their space and where can we get those messages for them as part of that. We had flyers available digitally, but also so that people could bring them to their meetings. And again, I go back to those key messages. This allowed us to differentiate messaging, but most importantly, get those words to the supervisors, because as they're announcing it in their meetings, now they have the same language. So it doesn't matter who within the 18,000 employees is talking about Eureka, somehow they're all saying the same thing, which really just helps in terms of that messaging and that experience that we wanted to create as part of that. I mentioned that we did have a heavy focus on videos. So I know that this presentation is going to be available, I think, in the library is what it's called. And so if you click on the first box, then that does link to a video. So you can check out how we really introduced Eureka to the group. And we have a progression of all of our videos. That first video, our goal was, I don't really care if you know everything that there is to know about Eureka. I want you to walk away, talk in your team meeting, you know, and tell your family at home, hey, I don't know what it is, but there's this really cool thing coming and I want to be part of it. And that was something that we heard over and over from participants, or rather employees. You know, we'd reveal branding and in the room they'd be like, ooh. We had a couple of people just internally here who relayed messages back where they're like, I don't really know what Eureka is, but whatever it is, I want to be part of it. And so it's like, how do we get the first hook? And then once we get that, get the next hook. So we kind of continually increased that as we went along. And then finally, we used gamification. So we created internally, one of our team members designed what's known as the Pioneer Badge. And this badge was available to anyone who completed a curriculum within the first 60 days. And so in that curriculum, it featured 3 micro-learning videos that highlighted 3 skills we identified that if people know these basics, then they'll be able to use it, as well as connecting them with Skillsoft. So we had purchased content and we wanted to make sure we were maximizing that. So if they went through this curriculum, we knew that they knew how to use the system and they knew that Skillsoft was available, and then they got a Pioneer Badge. So going forward, that curriculum will be available, but you don't get to be a pioneer. And so this was something that as we're introducing it, you know, people would cut us off in webinars and they're like, don't worry, we're going to get it. Or it became like that Pokemon type of thing, like I got to get this, you got to catch them all type of thing. And so the badge was something that we had a lot of fun with, that we continue to use some of the imagery, but really just driving that, you know, you want to be part of something special. It's not every day that a county implements something as big as this, and it's not every day that you get to be part of that. So this was something that we really focused on as a key indicator for engagement and user adoption as part of that. And all of that really worked for us. So for us, it was taking the Goldilocks approach for timing, using all of the spaces in which people get messages, formally and informally, kind of just finding what is that just right approach to that. Layering messages, we are creating all the messages, but we're not delivering all of the messages. So making sure that we're understanding who's going to resonate the most with people. And so having multiple touch points, relevant sponsors, et cetera. And then really just making them feel compelled to earn that badge, like I said. So all of that led up to, for day one utilization, just day one, 40%, which was huge. We had really great feedback from the curriculum, and these numbers are, you know, several, like 6 months old now at this point. We continue to have really high course ratings, and ultimately, this is an older dashboard at this point, but this particular group went up to 88%. In terms of their completion for that Pioneer badge within that first 60 days, which was great. That meant that we had, you know, 88% of one department voluntarily saying, I want that. Now, of course, that rises with EEO and compliance and things like that. But to have 88% of your population just voluntarily opt into something, we thought was pretty significant, and we were happy about that overall. Now, one of the things after the go live I mentioned from our communication piece and, you know, marketing and that campaign, we realized, okay, about 3 weeks before the end of the 60, we switched to what we call a 60 and 60. So we use the innovation adoption curve and benchmarking to identify, like, what is a good completion rate that we should strive for. So the innovation curve puts us at, you know, 50% is good. That might voluntarily be early adopters and jump into something. And then from what we were seeing from industry, most organizations had significantly lower adoption. So we really wanted to challenge ourselves. So that's where we got 60. And you know, when you think 60%, oh, that's a D, you know, right? So we made 60 and 60, and that felt whole to us. And we knew just from our research that that was a pretty good mark, which meant that 60% of the users needed to earn their badge within the first 60 days. So winners, each of the winning departments, if they actually met their 60 and 60 challenge, then they got another badge. And so it was a mystery badge. We didn't reveal what it was, and that was, you know, really exciting for the group as part of that. So as part of our 60 and 60, you know, we had a separate communication plan. We had separate media, separate posters, separate approaches. We sent out emails where people would print out a page that said, I'm a Eureka Pioneer, are you, right? And so it was all about, again, just tapping into all the sources of influence to get to that tipping point. And what we found is that people really leaned in. We had people sending us pictures of displays that they created, of different ways that they added to the communication plan. We had people Photoshop themselves into our spaceman here. We had people taking pictures and really just taking, again, ownership, but not only ownership of here's a system that we can use, but how do we continue to engage in that? And so we use playlists, learning connected to our needs assessments, and additional micro-learning on some common functionality. All of that continues to be available for users even post 60 and 60. And then we had overall, it was 93% met their 60 and 60 challenge. And so we were really, really happy with that. That just meant one department was just shy of it. And so we found that the 60 and 60 challenge was just like a nice cherry on the ice cream sundae to really get us where we needed to be as part of that. So in terms of thinking like a marketer, it really goes to knowing all of the spaces in which your employees are influenced or they see messages, leaving breadcrumbs, the continual use of the messaging, but also making sure that it's coming from different people and that it's layered. We all know it can't just be like one and done, right? We did track data. I was all about the data. I was checking and refreshing dashboards like every hour just to see where we were as part of that. And we used any and all form of media. So again, if we were looking at the system as being more like the consumer internet and we really wanted that experience to be like what you would feel at home, you know, if you turn on Netflix, we needed to make sure that everything that was out, that was communicating about what it was, reinforced that as part of that. And then I didn't talk specifically about evaluation here, but everything that we did from a marketing perspective has data to back it up and was connected to our evaluation plan. So our communication campaign as part of that was super critical and is a tool that we have and I'm willing to share, as well as, again, just looking back at the key messages. There's also really great free resources out there and affordable tools. I'm sure, you know, many of you are using them. These were really helpful for us. We used Canva to do some of the internal design as well as InDesign, but Canva worked great. And for videos, you know, we really leaned on Biteable and Spark and Vyond and, you know, created some e-learning around that. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but you know, all the branding, we initially worked with a gig website to come up with what the look and feel of that logo would be. We created the rest of it, but that was a critical starting part for us as part of that. So again, willing to share and kind of talk shop about what worked for us and learn what worked for you as part of that. But that's all available. I'm definitely willing to share. And then finally, you know, when I look at what was another way that was really critical that we included in our change management plan to drive that user adoption was making sure that we understood the change readiness of our organization and matched the approach. We actually had different implementation plans throughout the whole of this process until we ended up resting on what our final option was. And that, in large part, was really due to the change readiness of the organization. So as part of this, you know, I want everyone to have everything now, but our organization faces a high level of change saturation. You know, like what organization doesn't in today's age? We have multiple competing priorities. And this change was not just asking to use a different system. Remember, this was about culture change. So this goes back to, you know, there are new behaviors that are being asked of employees and supervisors. There's new mindsets that are required for to, you know, shift in this culture. And so we needed to do this in a way that was palatable for the checkbook, but also for the people. At a high level, this is our roadmap that we continue to work off of. In addition to this, we also spread out our implementation into 3 phases. So far, 18 departments are live. The remainder of the county will go live with learning this time next year, and then we'll also have performance. And so, in fact, we went live with 5 more departments this week. So first, it's getting everyone up and running, you know, aligning under a single LMS for learning as part of that, giving them access to the content that we purchased, and then looking at how do we centralize all countywide training, get them up and running on that, centralizing compliance, and really having this be in a single place. Once you go live, then we shift our focus with the departments to maximizing the use of the system. If we had come out the gate with the departments, moving them from Excel spreadsheets and, you know, filing cabinet notes to just going into the system with all of these great features, that would have been too much for our group. That was part of the assessment. And so this allowed them to go live on what we call like county. And then from there, we're adding, you know, let's bring in automating onboarding. Let's focus on the competencies, development plans, playlists, curriculum, gamification, et cetera. And that is a way that really has driven continued buy-in and confidence for the groups as a whole. So the third phase there is really looking at how do we expand. So we'll be implementing performance module in summer of next year. And then we're also looking at, like, you know, how can we use Engage? How can we use Onboard as part of this? And so it's just continually taking one step further. And then ultimately, we'd love to look at, you know, how do we leverage this great system and approach as a service delivery model for some of our programs in the county as a whole. Now, it's not just about making it palatable for your employees. You know, early on I mentioned that it wasn't just the county going through the change curve, we were too, and there's all these emotions with it, right? And it was really vital to remember our team, especially in a phased approach. So we, of course, had a variety of celebrations along the way in different formats, but two that I want to mention that were particularly fun for us. The first one that you'll see here on the left, we used, it was an empty bulb, which is our logo in the beginning, and then we put all of our milestones on Post-it notes. It didn't matter how small or big it was, but whenever we accomplished a milestone, then that person moved their Post-it note, everyone gathered around, and we celebrated it. And it was just such a great ritual that we were able to create for ourselves, and it's even great to see that in the system or on the wall. It's still outside my office now. And then for the week of launch, you know, I had everyone on the team contribute to, you know, tell me a celebration song that really pumps you up, or one that you're like, yeah, we did it. And so we have two playlists that we used for implementation to kind of help people groove through the week, so to speak. Again, we did several different things that helped the team, but I think the bottom line here for us was to not forget about the team. You know, they're a stakeholder group as well, and nothing happens without the team, so how do we need to support them? And that, again, was a critical part of that change management piece. So here, product roadmaps were helpful, differentiating success at go live versus post go live, and then putting in that structure to support everyone, including your team, as part of that. So all of that leads up to, you know, we wanted to use this as a way to start shifting culture. And, you know, going back to the beginning, we wanted that culture of continuous development, driving business alignment, engagement, really creating efficiencies where we can. And so we've seen that, you know, people are asking for us to move up on the schedule. Everyone wants to be part of it at all levels. You know, we're hearing those things, we're seeing that. We now have tools and resources for meaningful conversations and development. Things are available on demand, so you no longer have to ask permission to learn and grow, or to support your employees and helping them learn and grow. We have line of sight to data that we couldn't even dream of before, and so all of that is really helping us move forward. And again, we continue to really have high user adoption, and that continues to grow with each implementation as part of that. So at the core here, you know, make it theirs, shift to being a facilitator, and always know your stakeholders and know that they change. You know, this is a multi-year implementation process from contract to go live. So people change, situations change, got to stay in the conversation. Communicate like a marketer, always making them like, how do you compel them to engage? And then just know that the overwhelmed will opt out. So understand the change readiness of your group, and then take an approach that best matches that as part of that. And those were really critical aspects as part of our overall change management approach as part of that. So with that, I've seen some questions coming in. I'll pass it back over, but I just want to thank everyone for kind of listening to our story, and again, willing to share anything if you want to reach out.
Thank you, Jamie, for your presentation. We will now start the Q&A. I will read out the questions for Jamie to answer. So the first question we have is from Alice. Do you use your Eureka branding on instructor-led training announcements prior to implementation?
Yes, well, yes and no. So we did a brand reveal probably 6 to 7 weeks before we started going live employee facing in our phase 1. And up until that point, we had just generic branding around it. You know, Cornerstone was always really prominent. We would refer to it as a ITMS, or Integrated Talent Management System. And we had all of those key messages, but they had different formatting. We did a huge focus on a brand reveal, which was fun. And then at that point, everything switched over to Eureka branding. So from now on, all you see is Eureka branding. And for phase 2 and beyond departments, they see that from the beginning. So there's not a brand reveal like there was with phase 1. But that was something that was really fun and a cool part of our change management plan.
Thank you. Now we have a couple questions from Sandra. How do you reach field workers? How do field workers access the system?
That is such a good question. And it was definitely and continues to be something that we focus a lot of energy on. So we have multiple departments with field workers, and they all function a little different. So our default is that in every location, there's a computer portal where individuals go and they access the computer and they log in. Now that works, you know, when you have required training, people are more likely to go in there. But for something like this, we needed to support them more. So we actually put together plans with the individual departments and looking at like what was going to make sense for them. So some of them were road shows. Some of them were actually doing workarounds to have everyone in the same place at the same time and kind of approach it that way. My peer, the Senior Manager of Learning and Development, did something really great for our phase 2. I mentioned we just went live with 5 departments this week. And so what she did was with one of the departments that has a lot of field workers, she shared with them like, okay, there was another department that has field workers and they knocked it out of the park. And so it created a little bit of a natural competition. And so that department chose to have another level of competition where they really focused on communication in the first week with those field workers, with their goal to get everyone to do their Pioneer Badge this week. And that's working really well so far. So it goes back to having a separate strategy, having those conversations, and knowing for us, field workers aren't the same all across the county. So we needed to have different approaches within the different departments.
Thank you, Jamie. The next question comes from Joseph. Were the Pioneer Badges tied to any compensation/benefits rewards?
No, it's a bragging rights. So that was something that was a big part of the conversation. We weren't able to monetarily incentivize anyone as part of the go live, and we didn't even have a budget to like physically give them something as part of that. And so we really relied on, this is something that is special, it's unique, and you want to be part of this. And so we've actually seen that come to life. So people are naturally kind of wanting to make sure that they don't miss out on this limited edition, because it's not available now for phase 1. If you work in one of those initial departments, you can't get it. It's only available for a certain period of time, and that seems to really be working for us.
Joseph also has a second question. How did you enforce your leaders were spreading the messages?
That's a great question, because we have a huge amount of population. So we tried to make it easy. We made it as easy as possible for everyone as part of that. And we also used relevant sponsors and individuals to share the message. So it wasn't always us asking for people to engage. It was the department heads, it was their direct supervisors, et cetera. And so I think taking that approach really allowed people to see how relevant it was for them. And then we made it as easy as possible in terms of the communication that was sent out. So there wasn't a heavy lift for them to do except to make some space for that. And then the gamification and competitions that we created through the Pioneer Badge and later the 60 and 60, I think really rounded that out for them as a whole. We also ran specific webinars for supervisors to say, here's how this benefits you. And I think that change in the conversation like how does this make your life easier as a supervisor, drove engagement with them as well. And we continue to get some great feedback from that.
Great. And now we have one final comment from Tana. Says, also did Eureka ultimately replace your existing LMS?
Yes. So we are in a phased implementation. So I have 5 departments now that still are on our previous LMS. And as soon as those 5 departments go live on Eureka, then we will officially sunset our previous LMS. But anyone who's live now is no longer on the system.
Thank you, Jamie. We are at the close of the hour. Jamie, do you have any closing remarks for the audience?
I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening to our story. Again, I'm happy to connect and talk shop. I presented something similar at a conference, and I've really loved connecting with people and hearing about their ideas and strategies and just kind of learning from each other. So happy to connect with anyone, and thanks again for joining in.
On behalf of IPMA HR, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Jamie, for today's presentation, and a big thank you to the attendees for participating today. As a reminder, the slides will be on the IPMA HR website under the webinar library within 2 business days. Thank you, and this ends today's presentation.